Hello and welcome to another episode of Writers Talk, a series in which I talk to writers about, well, writing. Today, we have special guest Nick Walters, who I've known for quite some time now. He is, of course, a fairly prolific author these days. He's written a fair shed of Doctor Who novels and related books and loads of other stuff, I believe. Nick, please introduce yourself.
Oh yeah, I am Nick Walters. What Andy's just said. Yeah, I've done 9 novels now and a number of short stories, not just for Doctor Who. I've branched out into horror of late, which I find is quite fun to write. Mm-hmm. Non-standard horror. I don't go down the werewolves, ghosts, vampires route. It's sort of strange, what they call slipstream stuff. And I also write poetry and do stand-up poetry, and I also play and sing the guitar. And recently, during lockdown, I that took off. I've always had guitars, but I just found, it really took off. And every Wednesday, every Thursday, I'm doing that. So quite a creative person.
That's quite.
Yeah.
I'm sure I must have known this.
I've never thought, I'd love to sing. But I did karaoke nights and found out that I could sing.
So
it's something I can do. not something I leaned in, but something I've found myself doing. And as a writer, I find if you do perform poetry or music, you get instant feedback. Whereas with a short story or novel, it gets published. You forget about it. Months later, you read a diatribe on the internet and go, oh God, or not. It depends what it is. I've read some horrible things. If you're a writer and you want to find bad reviews, you will find them.
Yes,
everything ever has had a bad review. The best films in the world, 2001: A Space Odyssey. No, Andy, I know what you think about that. I've seen you. Yeah, exactly. So everything.
I loved it. We're about.
Oh, okay, right. So that's you get instant feedback on as a writer. It gratifies that side of it. So it all complements really.
And beyond writing, of course, you're an avid bike rider.
Bike rider, yes. You can see one of the bikes there. That one's a bit knackered, so she's been put out to pasture. I've got a road racing bike and I've got a hybrid bike for doing all the boot pooling about on. So yeah, I'm always trying to get out every opportunity. I cycle to work. Yes, I do have a day job. That's another thing as a writer. Unless you're, it's very hard. If you go into writing with the attitude, I'm going to make money, make a living, it's not the best way to do it. You'll be disappointed. You might not be, but you're more likely to.
Well, you may be one of those lucky few that can genuinely make a living out of it, but sadly, yes.
I mean, I see it as a person. You're not just one thing. My day job isn't me. The writing isn't me. It's all me. You have different sides to you, and
Absolutely.
Whatever job you do, it doesn't define you really. You are, and you need to bring your best self to whatever you're doing. That's what I find.
And I think if you actually are a writer and you're able to do a day job or whatever time of the day job, and you're writing, it's a nice outlet for less than great days at work.
Yes, I mean, for example, I've had lots of experience in lots of sectors. And offices and working environments. And I've got a collection of short stories I've been building up based in the workplace, horror stories based in the workplace. And the strapline is, you think you're having a bad day in the office, wait till you meet these guys. And I haven't really looked at it for a while. One of them is about a guy who's making cardboard boxes, and they gradually go more and more mad making these cardboard boxes, and it's sort of and so I've been trying to put that together for ages, but these novels keep coming up, and I'm not complaining.
No more, Nick. No more.
No. I'd rather, and I have loads.
No more.
I have loads of short stories that I always find ideas. I've never stuck for ideas because I've got enough in the bank to be going on with.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Because every time I've come to you initially, you're like, well, what sort of book do you need? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, let me think about it. Like about 10 minutes later, or well, maybe half an hour, big email. What about this? Da, 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 da. Okay, let's do it. And it is that quick with us, generally.
Yeah, I mean, with writing, with these recent books, I mean, when I was writing something like Dominion, when I was starting out, and
Just
you
by
do,
there by my head.
yeah, you do agonize over your prose for ages, honing the descriptions and just making.
That was your first novel, right?
Yeah, well, Dry Pilgrimage was the first one with Paul.
Oh, of course it was. Yeah,
Leonard,
which is
yeah.
also
So it's like
there.
when you start off, I found my prose I was worried about, but now, as long as I've planned things out and thought about things and let it percolate, the prose style comes almost everything I write is a first draft, and obviously it needs editing. But yeah, I do find that it's one of the things that gets better as you get older.
It just
I'm
occurs to me.
I'm almost as old as William Hartnell when he started playing Doctor Who now. That's a sobering thought, that is, tell you.
Oh God, don't even talk about it, man. Every time I think about, like, when I'm at work and like yesterday, so it's like, how old are you? And like, older than you. That'll do.
I'll do, yeah.
Don't you worry about it.
It's a handful of heartbeats to a Time Lord, and
Well,
so on.
also we're not Time Lords, sadly. Ugh.
I'll speak for yourself. Ginger at last. It's Ginger, it was.
It is Ginger. It's thinking about it, your first Doctor Who novel then, not because Bernice obviously came first, but your first Doctor Who novel was actually kind of a unit novel, wasn't it?
Yeah, it had the title Dominion, which has been used for other things.
Yeah.
There's a Star Trek thing. There's a video game, and there's a Sisters of Mercy song. That's what I based it on.
Naturally.
And now there's a new film which I'm going to see tonight, Jurassic World Dominion, which sure will be, well, whatever it is.
Maybe you have to do Dominion 2 at some point.
And a nice night out in an air-conditioned cinema. So yeah, that was the first one, and it was very strange how that happened, because we just finished Dry Pilgrimage, and Paul Leonard rang me up and said, Nick, this is a Friday. He rang me at work. He said, Nick, Steve Cole, the range editor at the time, has got a gap in his 8th Doctor schedule. If you can come up with a story this weekend, I'll stop wobbling the table now. If you can come up with a story this weekend, he'll probably buy it on Monday. So, of course, I couldn't think of a damn thing, you know. The only trouble with Doctor Who, and it's even worse now, is everything's been done. And this was 1998. So 24 years ago, God. And so I just came up with, what can I rip off? What's popular? The X-Files. Let's do a sort of X-Files. I've always been interested in alien abductions.
Right.
And so I thought, right, let's do a story about alien abductions, but make it not alien abductions, make it different. Do a sort of Arthur C. Clarke, weird alien world, a Brian Aldiss type thing, and set it in Sweden, because all these things usually are set in England or America. And I've got experience of Sweden. It's a very beautiful country. Not often in the news, you don't hear about it. You go there, the forests are beautiful, and they're quite, you know, a good civilization they've got over there, quite together. And so I thought, yeah, let's do a bit of a tourist thing for Sweden. And this was decades before Scandi Noir, you know, The Killing and Borgen, whatever. So I led.
You were there first.
Well, actually, there's a novel by Kirsten Ekman. That's where I got the name Kirsten from, or is it Kristen? Called Blackwater. And of course, there's Miss Miller's Feeling for Snow, which I don't think is Swedish, Peter Hoeg, you know. So there was the literature about at the time. So I was trying to sort of make it stand out a bit from the, you know, usual run of books set in. Well, Doctor Who had never been to Sweden, and he's never been back. Well, the Doctor has never been back to Sweden, as far as we know.
Doing that again.
the new guy might be going there. Who knows?
Who knows?
He does.
I'm just, well, yeah, hopefully. You do have, because you mentioned Sisters of Mercy with Dominion, you do tend to have a lot of musical references in your work.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, that's part of the fun, isn't it? You know, I mean, I've got away with a reference in Legacy of the Dominator of Marquis Smith out of the Fall, my all-time hero, sadly passed away a couple of years ago. And Harold Chorley, I thought, I can't resist the idea. And I looked it up. 1983, in the Fall, they were sort of between albums. Yeah. I thought, it's the Whoniverse. And so I put him in. I thought Andy could put a red line through that, but he left it in as a little present. Thanks, man. Well, I know how much you love
Fall. I know how much you love the Fall.
And if it makes people think, who is this?
When I saw that, I'm like, yeah, I know. Okay, fine. Yeah. Whatever.
I've already been told how tragic it is for me to put that in. And characters' names have come from bands. I mean, in the Fall of Iquitine, there's lots of things that are Cocteau Twins songs.
Yeah.
It's good. Full band name members. In Dominion, Nagel and Wollstonecroft. And yeah, I mean, because it's good to have a source of surnames. I mean, you know, you're not stealing them, you know, they are names, and some of them are good names. Major Wollstonecroft is a good name. after
See,
Simon Wollstonecraft, who was a drummer in the Fall.
for
And
myself,
yeah,
when it comes to surnames, usually I just go onto Facebook, look on my chat list, and see whichever names come up actually in front of me. I'm like, oh, that surname will do. Yeah, that surname will do. But then by the time the book comes out, I've usually changed it.
oh well, I mean,
The name,
I ask people if they want to be in it. I mean, I've got my work colleagues. I won't say their full names, but let's just say that Corporal, I think it is DeCaro, and WCPC Swingler are named after two of my work colleagues who gave me permission to do that, and found it amusing that their names would be. It's just using their names.
When I read Legacy with Di Carroll, I wasn't too sure if it was meant to be D, as in like a Italian sort of.
It is, yeah.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't quite sure if that was meant to be his first name.
Perhaps no. It's DeCaro. DeCaro. Okay. It's an old name. It goes all the way back to the mafia, the Corleones, that sort of thing. Right. So yeah. So there's that. So and just make things up.
Well, that's what we all do, right? Yeah. That's what we get paid to do: make things up.
Yeah.
So I don't think we've ever talked about it necessarily publicly, anyway. Obviously, I know, and you know. How did you get caught up in the Universal Lethbridge Stewart?
How did I get caught up in Universal Lethbridge Stewart? Well, you asked me.
Ask your mind back.
you asked me back in 2013.
Yeah, it would have been about that. 14, yeah.
And I think you said you wanted me to do to the quarks what Lawrence Miles had done to the protons.
Correct.
And I'm not Lawrence Miles. Nobody. He's a genius. I thought, I'm not going to. I just turned them into sort of like Swiss Army quarks and gave them extendable legs and things. But they are slightly ridiculous. I thought, let's make them a bit more fearsome. And the same with the Dominators. I find the Dominators a much maligned story, but I think people miss the point. It is a comedy, really, or a domestic comedy between Rhaego and Toba, like an old married couple arguing all the time. And the humor is in there. And so when I wrote Mutually Assured Domination, I wanted to get that humor across. I wanted them to be, trespassers will be destroyed, which is, of course, a ridiculous thing,
No, it's did. Oh, yes.
and calling one of them probationer Asbo, I thought, that's actually, but also make them threatening and give Var, the leader, make him, a more developed, more intelligent figure. And it's worked because he's now been in 4 books and has developed.
Done well. He's he caught my interest clearly to the point where I'm like, yeah, we can definitely do some stuff with this guy. So, and it's panned out fairly well, I think. He's become quite an interesting character. I mean, and it's great that he's been put to bed by you.
I mean, I felt like
unless he survived. You never know.
It took a very strange turn, Legacy of the Dominator, because he's a Dominator. He's a bad guy. And I don't want to give anything away, but I explored that a bit and wanted to show maybe there was more to him than that. And I really don't want to say anymore, but I found it fascinating to see what motivates him and what could have happened to him had the events of the book not happened. Really can't say anything because I really don't want to spoil it. And I found that the most compelling to write. And it's almost a tragedy. He's almost a tragic figure, I found. And let's see what happens next. I don't think his arc is over completely. Or his story.
In some ways, definitely not.
Some ways, definitely not, yeah.
Because we don't know, or again, like you said, we don't want to give stuff away yet.
No, it's very tricky, really.
Because it's only just come out, so we don't want to, in a few months, we can maybe do another one. We can really get into nuts and bolts. But yeah, it's only.
We don't want to give away the Doctor Who cameo in this, where the 5th Doctor turns up. although there is a sort of implied 5th Doctor cameo-ish, which I think you pared back a bit in case we got on
did
some
pare
toes.
back a bit, yes.
But
It
it's
just,
there. It's there if people pick up on it.
yeah,
As
it's
it's
still
set in,
there, but I thought it was a little bit too on the nose for
it was
me.
too on the nose, but you can either take it, is it or isn't it? And it's left open. And I thought, you know, that would be quite a cheeky. It's in one scene, you know, and it's there if you want to pick up on it. And that's one of the fun things about writing in a shared universe. You've got to be aware of copyright, but if you can put things in that reference other things, it just goes to enhance it. I mean, I know in the Lethbridge Stewart books, there's things that you've put in that I haven't quite, because you know the whole story of all of them.
Yeah, of course.
And in Mutually Assured Domination, there's a character, and I was like, you know, but you've got the whole picture, and that is one of the joys of it. It is such a huge universe that you've built out of this this character and unit.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, in Mutually Assured, that was a odd one because the original plan, you may recall, that was going to be Chorley's first appearance in the series. But then, of course,
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
yeah, and
then somebody else
decided to use him without running it by me, and I'm like, that really undercuts what Nick's already written, which, you know, so that, as often happens, you get put in a position where you're like, okay, right, you can either see this problem or you can make a virtue of it somehow. And of course, that's what we did. I basically, where this originally would have been Chorley in a previous book, I basically changed into a whole new character. So, but it's still linked in with what you was doing with Chorley. So it became a virtue instead of a problem. But yeah.
Poor old Chorley, he does get the bad end of the stick in a lot of these stories.
I mean, what you did with Chorley and Mutually Assured pretty much defined everything for him from that point on. You know, because I remember when I first read, I'm like, oh, there's definitely some places we can take him now. He's going to have a really, well, frankly, horrible story now.
Not the only one. I mean, a lot of people suffer at the hands of the Dominators, and especially Bill Bishop. I mean, what you did with him in the Domination game, really, really, I mean, I don't want to spoil that either. That was a few years ago. It really is. And that was the seeds of what happens in Legacy, the Dominator.
Well, that one's interesting because you may not be aware, or indeed people watching may not be aware, that Domination game took like 3 times to get off the ground, 3 different authors. One person fell through for whatever reason. The next one came along. I think it might have been the next one had a bit of an issue with Sally's role in the story. Because originally, what actually happens to Bill was going to be Sally.
Right.
That was the original. Again, I'm being vague enough. Even though this has been out for a little while, there may be still people not ready yet.
Okay, yeah.
But you'll know what I'm talking about, and anybody who's read it will know what I'm talking about. But when Ali came in onto the project, she was the one who suggested, I did have an idea, she said, of making Bill go through this instead. She goes, but it may, obviously, you may not like it because obviously that would radically change Bill's story going forward.
It was her idea. It's a great idea. It really does work.
And I was literally, when she said, I'm like, yeah, actually, no, go for it. I'll just do a few tweaks of the stories that follow on just so it still flows. So there's a fallout to it. And of course, that pretty much set the stage of, I knew then pretty much what I wanted it to end with in terms of what became this book. You know, I knew there and then this is going to be the end of that story. So when we did Rise of the Dominator in the Laughing Gnome sequence, I was able to throw a few lines into Rob's story that suggested what for them had already happened in the past, but for the readers hadn't happened yet. I mean, you know, I threw it at you and you're like, oh, hang on. So when
it took a while to get your head around it because the Laughing Gnome stuff is quite complicated, and I'm glad that unit dating didn't feature in Legacy, because it's 1983 and it's 1983 and that's it. We're not going there. I mean,
well, that's what I figure. It's like, it's 983. I throw the odd line. I think we did like a little line with Benton that was it Benton, I think says something along the lines of, he thinks it was X amount of time, but it sometimes feels like years, sometimes it feels like weeks or whatever.
Yeah, things like that. Well, yeah,
that's did something similar as well, which is fun because it keeps it vague enough, but it also just plays into the, as it were, the controversy over unit dating, and it's fun to do. You know, it's fun for the readers, it's fun for the authors, and you know, it's a fun thing for the fans because they get it, they know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's quite entertaining. Let's move out of the Dominators. We'll go back to this one shortly. Talk about your other Left Fitzgerald books, because you have done 2 other ones which weren't Dominator focused, which are these 2 here. So let's talk about them a bit. Where did Man from Yesterday come from, as you recall?
Well, you wanted to do a book about the Brigadier's father.
Correct.
And this one went through a lot of changes from my point of view because of the aliens and the nature of the aliens in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of years before I wrote this is going to sound weird, but I was on a train going down to the Isle of Wight, and it was going through the Dorset countryside, and there's a train track, and I was daydreaming, and I had this vision of these 2 creatures, sort of elf that turned out to be the Sylphines, walking along and seeing this train and hiding, and these being scared because they haven't seen anything like it on their own planet. And I got on my notebook and I just wrote Celis and Jarn. That's their names now.
Yeah.
So when I came to this, I thought, Celis, yeah, that scene is in the book where the train is going past and somebody sees these aliens, and the aliens are scared. They don't know, you know. So that is where they came from. And so I don't really have weird mystic things like that. But you know, ideas come. You think, oh, I'll use that. And of course, the story of the Brigadier's father was more or less dictated by what's got to happen to him. And I found that was quite a tricky one to write because there were so many characters in it.
Oh, there was.
And for some reason, because of the aliens, I was going to originally do it, a lot of it from the aliens' point of view. You suggested don't do that because, you know, have them a mystery. So instead of that, I have scenes where people encounter them, like there's a family going on holiday. Yeah. And they almost run one over, and it's
very 70s, I must say.
Well, there's a train driver, and there's a guy going fishing. Yeah. So I introduce more and more characters to it, but it somehow works. It gives it a sort of more, gives it a wider feel. And I really, with this one, it's set in Norfolk and in Cromer, obviously. And what's the RAF Marham, isn't it?
I think
there's a children's novel called Thunder and Lightnings, where about this boy moves somewhere and he's got this friend Victor who's obsessed with airplanes at Marham, and the very gate where they go to watch the fire gate, to watch the airplanes, you can go to on Google Maps. So I thought, and then the whole Alan Partridge thing came in because that's set in, and I really planned this one out using a map, and it's getting all the timings right because there's lots of movement in this book. And I planned this one out and I plotted it all on a map. So it's sort of like a road movie in a way that goes from Cromer and it ends up in Hunstanton or something. And I really got the job. It was just a military operation writing this book. It really was really, really complex to put together.
It's interesting you say it's like a road journey because I find that I hate to use the word trope because it always has negative connotations, but it's not always a negative thing. But there's certain things I find that you return to, and the road trip is very much one of them. There's a road trip in this, there's a road trip in this, there's a road trip in this, in some way.
Yeah. I don't even drive, man. I
don't drive. Domination, they're all over the place as well. I know that's something that you do tend to return to, which is not a bad thing because it keeps a nice variety.
Well, you've got to get the characters from A to B, haven't you?
Yeah, for sure.
And if you can get that as part of the plot, I mean, a lot of it, again, in Legacy of the Dominator, there's Damon's journey. He travels from somewhere, but that's part of his realization of what the world is like. So it's part of the character. It's not pointlessly driving nowhere.
Oh, no. I mean, every time there's always the journey is consequential. It's not like it's just
weird.
Random.
I don't drive. I like to travel. I've got my bikes. I use the train. I've never even learned to drive, and it hasn't really impacted my life at all.
Another thing that I find you do, which I certainly do a lot, like you said with Man from Yesterday, it tends to be well peopled, your books. It does tend to have a lot of characters in it. not just the main characters, lots of ancillary characters, and I tend to do that as well. And when you was just talking about that with Man from Yesterday, it occurs to me, if we ever get this to become an audiobook, which hopefully we will one day, whoever reads it's going to hate us. Because one thing I learned from not from Mutually Sure, from the first batch of books, when Henry Malloy did it, when I had a conversation with him, he said to me, with Forgotten Son in particular, he said there was so many characters, so I had to come up with so many voices for everybody. And he's like, and I'm like, fair point.
With Legacy, it really is 4 characters. It's Damon, the Brigadier, Bishop, and Var. I thought 4 is enough, and there are some other characters. And I thought, well, I'm going to limit the point of view to 2 of the characters and alternate. I'm not going to say which 2. And if I told the story from the point of view of, say, Var, it would have been completely different. Of course, that. And especially if it had gone to another character, it would have been. But I thought I wanted to keep it. Well, the Brigadier is obviously going to be one of the point of view characters. It's his story. He's still at Brendan. He's still teaching. So, and then it's his story. So what am I trying to make? I just wanted to keep the point of view tight on 2 characters, so things happen. And of course, Mr. Sable, who turns up, a bit of a spoiler, but I'm not going to say anything else about him. he turned up late in the story.
Well, I seem to vague memory.
He was never part of it, but
last minute.
Halfway through, well, not quite last, halfway through, I thought this needs something, and there's something mentioned early in the story about sinister organizations wanting to do certain things without exposure. And so it was always there in the story. It just needed, and so Mr. Sable became, so that's a 3rd point of view, but it wasn't originally, and he's not actually in many scenes, and he helps drive the story forward.
Mr. Sable was a curious one for me, which I said to you in an email before, that when I'm reading it, I'm getting a sense of, I feel like I should know this character, but of course, there's no way I could know this character because the book that he's going to be in,
this hasn't been written yet.
There's, it's still in.
Well, no, I've had him in mind for ages, and he's a lot younger because the book he's going to be in, set in 1999. Oh, the cat's going mad.
I just had one of those too.
So he's about in his mid-20s, and he's very cocky and arrogant.
Course, yes, right,
in this story, and but he's also quite a sinister character, and so that was quite interesting.
It was actually quite fun because his way of speaking.
He's from up north, basically.
Like cock, Yeah. And I have to admit, when I first read the first time he used that, and I'm thinking,
it's not cock as in, it's cock as in cock,
For sure. Yeah. But you know what today's occasionally, people. It's fairly old regional phrase that some people may not necessarily have got. Probably.
Well, you can't. I mean, if people, let's not talk about the fall of equity. For God's sake, I've been roasted over that one. But there are some things you can't stop people interpreting things. And once you've written something, if somebody says, "This is what I take from it," then absolutely, even if you didn't intend it, then if they take the meaning, that's the whole point of it. I mean, I've been, what you telling me about the road trips thing, that's quite interesting. I never would have thought of that.
Well, I've only noticed this because obviously I've been quite heavily involved in your last 4 novels.
Yeah.
Yep. And various short stories. So I'm seeing patterns with people I've obviously worked with quite a lot in the past 6 years. Like obviously you're not the only one who's got certain things you return. I mean, I return to stuff all the time. I'm terrible for it. It's like another thing I noticed you tend to return to, which is curious because as soon as you told me about your new project, I kind of chuckled to myself, is that you tend to have forests in a lot of your works.
Forests? Well, Dominion is certainly set in a forest.
Yeah. This obviously.
And from yesterday? Oh, yeah.
In this one. There's kind of a forest in this one, I seem to recall, because where they hide out is in the forest, unless I'm mistaken.
Oh, the hideout. Yeah, well.
Yeah.
That's a real forest, by the way. I just changed the name.
And obviously your new book has actually got forest, I believe, in the title.
No, well, are we allowed to say it? Or
no, don't give it away just yet. But
no.
When it comes out,
that one.
so I just
Yeah, it's got forest in the title, and it's set it in the forest.
yeah.
But
See,
it's nothing like the forest of in the forest of the night, that Doctor Who story. You know, so,
so
no,
the Earth's
so
not going to
nothing like
save
that.
them then.
That's interesting. Forests.
It's funny,
Woods.
isn't it? The stuff that
God, this has
we
been
return
really.
stuff and you don't realize.
This has been really a revelation. Really.
This
I
is
also, I've
this
also
time,
been told I
yeah.
like to have female characters that are taken over by aliens, and that makes me misogynist because in Dominion, Kirsten is taken over. The Fall of it, not Fall, yeah, Ariel gets taken over, and then you've got Aileen in Superior Beings. And I thought, oh yeah,
And
and
you've
in
got,
Reckless Engineering,
this woman here as
You've
well.
got Aboetta. I thought, oh god, 4 books of women you get, and I thought, well, I didn't mean to make them, so.
Well, even in this baby, you've got what's the face here? I forget her name now.
Oh, the Danger Men.
Yeah, she doesn't get taken over by an alien, but
She's a nasty piece of work.
she does get
Stella?
her body does get taken over temporarily.
Now that, while I was writing The Danger Man, that was a genius twist I thought of halfway through. I thought that's going to wow people. I thought people would be talking about this for years to come, which is not expected. And I did take it in really extreme directions, but you toned it back. I must admit, I did go a bit wild writing this book because it's part of the Laughing Gnome series. And I thought, well, what if you woke up in the body, and it's a great premise, you wake up in somebody's body and it's a spy in the middle of a mission, and you've got to somehow work out what the mission is. That's where it all came from.
Yeah.
And it had to fit in with a certain piece of Doctor Who continuity. And it hurts my head thinking about it. It really does. Because it is, the laughing is, I think it works. I think it hangs together. But by the ending, when we got to the explanation, it was getting a bit knotty. I think it works as an adventure story and the great characters. But it's complicated. I had a blast writing it, and the character of Stella, the sort of female. I thought I want a blonde Bond girl, sort of evil Austrian sort of hit woman, and she developed and into sort of the main, most interesting character. And I'm aware it's called The Danger Men, and this was at the time of before Me Too, but it's a bit, it's a bit sort of, but they're called The Danger Men. Is a piss take because they're Department M and they're being defunded and that.
Yeah.
So the Danger Men is sort of like a joke name, but having a strong female character in it, I think, helps mitigate that.
I think so.
My style is very action adventure sort of stuff, which can be a bit macho. I'm not a very macho person, but I like to subvert some of the tropes. I mean, the chief spy in The Danger Men is a bit useless. And that was a very.
Danger Men's an interesting book because, from our point of view, as in Candy Jar and just the Leffer Stewart stuff, it was a bit of an experiment, as I'm sure you remember, because it's the first book to literally have Bill leading the charge, where Anne and the Brig only appear as a brief cameo. And that was quite a late edition, I seem to recall.
It was, and that made it even more complicated.
We need to just at least make it appear, because it's called Left with Stewart, so he should appear at some point.
It's a Left with Stewart light book, like a
bleak. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, so
but it worked. It really worked, and generally the reception to this book, as the reviews have almost certainly been really good for that one. So it clearly worked. Bill was, I think, a strong enough character that he carried it really well. And you got a good hang on him, so that really helped as well.
Yeah, I feel quite an affinity with Bill. I don't know whether it's his age or his position but I don't know. I feel more affinity with him maybe than with Lestwick Stewart. Although writing, how old is a Brigadier meant to be in Legacy? 53? 50?
Yeah, he's gonna have to be.
That's my age,
Yeah.
He keeps thinking he's past it, and I'm 53, and I'm.
But back then,
at all.
Back then is very different, wasn't it? That's the thing.
Well, I suppose now I do find it a bit sometimes on the bike. Think, oh God, I'm not as young as I used to be, but I can still bomb up hills and everything.
Well, the thing is, I think people today, we generally live better lives, healthier lives as a rule. As a rule. Whereas back in the 90s, 80s, 70s, our age group, because we're not too dissimilar, we were back then considered kind of old. you know.
Yeah, I mean,
Now,
people, I mean,
no,
60 isn't old now. I mean, 70 isn't old now. I mean,
yeah,
Indiana Jones is 80. The Rolling Stones are touching 80 and they're still belting it out.
you know, thing, you know,
President of the United States is 80.
we've all
You know?
changed, man. Things are different now.
Hmm.
Things are very different. So let's talk a little bit more about legacy, because
Yeah.
we don't want to get kicked off. Because
Zoom.
I keep saying it's going to happen eventually. We're going to get kicked off soon, but it hasn't happened yet.
No.
I did one.
Tell us, won't it?
I assume it'll give us a warning.
Right.
I hope. I've done one that was over an hour long, so I'm guessing we'll be okay. But one day it's going to be like, crap. Yeah. So let's talk about your latest book, because obviously this is the one you want to sell right now. I mean, you make money for more, but this is the one. This is the one. This is, well, it's your last left with Stuart. You were there at the beginning, you were there at the end, which I think is apt, you know, very much so. You introduce Far, you get to wrap up his story. And as you were saying just before we recorded, with this wonderful cover. So
it is a fantastic cover, yeah. Everybody I know who, and I send it around to like work colleagues, they go, wow, that looks amazing. It's an amazing cover. You don't usually get that reaction, but people seem to think, you know, it's bold, it does sell the story, and it makes people interested. And the colors are fantastic. It's a great job.
Originally, when I went, because with Adrian Salmon, every time, without exception, I've gone to and said, right, you got time for a cover? Yep, cool, all right. I give him a brief, we'll have a chat on the phone or whatever. And he pretty much always delivers what I had in mind. He's really, really good at that. With this one, it's a little bit difficult because initially, like I say, right, these are the elements you should include. And then he was trying to get it together and it just wasn't clicking in place. And so I said to him, I'm like, well, think of it as more of a tug of war. So it could be more metaphorical type of cover as opposed to a literal one. And he's like, oh, yes. And he just knew exactly what to do. And here we are. But sometimes the books can be just the literal elements together, like, you know, in most of your books have been.
Yeah.
But this one was much more of it suggests what's actually the story's about as opposed to an actual scene. Because this doesn't actually happen.
No.
At least not literally.
No, it's great.
You know. And of course you've got this wonderful Quarkoid, which, as you well know, was a fairly late addition to the but it worked. It worked. You know.
Yeah, I've got to say there were some late additions. Like this old friend turns up because the Brigadier has to visit a garage at some point, and he suggested a certain character we've already named, but I'm not going to take it. And it works really well. And this character has something that mirrors something later on. So quite a lot of serendipity came into this. It really did. And there was a scene where he points, hang on a minute, the Brigadier is not doing anything. He's twiddling his thumbs while the plot's going on. I thought, oh God, yeah, well, it literally, because of the logic of the story, because of the time, blah, blah. And I thought, well, and that's where that scene with the Quarkoid came. They go to the pub and that's what happens. So, yeah, so it all came good, really.
Well, it's funny because when I first said to you about like him and Bishop just basically twiddling their thumbs in the pub for a bit, and you're like, yeah, there's no plot for them. I'm like, well, I'm sure there will be. And then, of course, you came back to me, I don't know, 20 minutes later going, actually, yes, I've got an idea.
Well, it's exactly, but when you write a book, I mean, I'm sure you know, I write very filmically. It's like I'm in a film, I'm writing a film, I visualize the thing like I'm writing down a film that's happening in my head. And the further you go through, you think, I got that scene next, it's set in, I don't know, in the Brigadier's flat, I've got that scene that's set in the tower block. And I wonder what that's, and as you go through, they drive up, they get in the lift, and it develops in front of you, and you're in there. And you know, when I think of it, I don't think of words, I just think of pictures.
Yeah.
And when you finish the whole thing, it's like a film or a world in your head. You can go back over like you're God, basically. And I'm sure that's how I work anyway. So when you say something like, oh, this is happening, we need, nickel resistance. It's obviously, I don't want this world to change. No. But obviously it isn't real and you have to, you know, so there will always be that resistance when you initially say it. I mean, I'll have to learn to think, right, step back, this needs to happen.
Well, you're one of these writers, for me, which is, you know, I think you've done the most novels in the series other than myself. I
Well,
believe.
I've done 4.
You've done 4. I've done only 3, no, 4 on my own actually, and a few co-authors. So yeah, and as you well know, I return to you quite often as soon as I get a chance. Nick, yep, I'm in.
I mean, God, I mean, it's such a privilege to do these things, as in the Doctor Who, If you told me when I was a kid, one day I'll be writing Doctor Who books, I'd have been like, because I grew up reading the Target books. It was a lot. I've got them all, and it's amazing.
Well, I've
It
said it
is.
to you before, and it's nice to get it out publicly. You're one of those reliable authors I know. When I come to you, the first draft you deliver to me, it may be a few really bonkers moments in it where I'll be like, let's pare that
Yes.
back a wee bit, but that's okay because I expect it. But I know that the core story and the majority of the book is there. It'll just be a
Well,
few little moments of
I'm glad you say
bring
that,
that back a
because
bit, let's add a bit, and
as
we
an
can do
author,
it.
you're full of self-doubt the whole time. I mean, Paul Cornell told me that you've got to think you're the best author in the world and the worst author in the world at the same time. You've got to have that self-confidence, but you've got to be able to and it's sometimes there's the 3 P's principle. There's procrastination, panic, and pain. That's the 3 P's. And procrastination is actually not a bad thing, because the
Not
way
at
I
all.
worked, well, procrastination is probably the wrong word. You're not doing nothing. With Legacy, I had 2 previous novels to read and lots of stuff to gen up on. And I didn't actually, you gave me the commission in April last year. I didn't start writing it till November, which seems insane. But all that time I was working on it, thinking about it, working on a synopsis, and most importantly, the subconscious. So even when I wasn't working on it. So by the time I started writing it, it came out completely smoothly. There's a few plot problems, and that's because you've let it simmer, and weird coincidences, magic things keep happening when you're writing. Like, and it's all slots together as if by magic. But no, you put the work in. The minds put the work in.
Yep.
If you write the synopsis, then immediately start writing it. It'll be what's this character like? What's this like?
Yeah, you need to let the percolate.
Yeah, I mean, and the influences as well. I mean, the tower block there's a tower block in the story. That's from one of my other stories, and it's sort of based on the sitcom Nightingales with Robert Lindsay. There's a chapter, there's a TV play called Penda's Fen, which is set in Pinvin and features something. And it's by Alan, oh God, I can't think of his name now, Penda's Fen. It's about this coming of age boy, and it's very, very weird. And it's where I got the location Pinvin from. And one of the characters refers to some government installation as some hideous angel of technocratic death, which is brilliant. So I nicked that. I hope they don't sue us, but I use that as a chapter title. And it works for the book. So little things like that all come together. If you start writing it immediately, you haven't had time to absorb all these influences, and you haven't had time to think about, what does Var wear? Oh, a leather jacket and boots and all that stuff. And yeah, so with the one I've just been commissioned now, we work on the synopsis, and it probably won't be till October that I start writing it, mainly because it's summer, holiday time. But it's always there, and I've always got notebooks writing.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, without trying to spoil anything. What is your next thing?
I thought we weren't meant to mention it.
Oh, I don't know. What we can. Well, this isn't going to go out for a couple of weeks yet, so it could well be.
No, it's not. No, I don't. Should we? Well, I don't want to annoy. It really is just been. I've just been asked to do it, and we're just talking about it. It could. I don't want to jinx it.
So your top secret project, then? It's
a top secret. It will be. I'd rather wait until the rest of the range is announced, that the other authors will be part of that, rather than saying, "Hey, I'm writing a new book," and I've done naff all so far for one page and started thinking about it, because that will just come back and bite me on the ass when they say, "Oh, we've decided not to do this," or I have writer's block. Writer's block is another thing. The
only writer's block I believe in is this thing here. This is the only writer's block I care about.
Oh, right. Writer's block is a capsule phrase. It can mean I can't be bothered, or it's usually to do with some problem. People say, "Do you ever run out of ideas?" I said, "No, I wish I could stop the blooming ideas. I've got so many ideas backed up, I've got enough to be working on. I don't want to think of new ideas, although I always am.
For me,
I have a lot of
sorry, go on.
I have a lot of outlet in poetry.
Right.
My mind produces this poetry, and I've done lots of stand-up, and it's, well, I'd say it amuses people. It seems to amuse people, and it is for adults mainly. And I've just written an epic poem about my childhood on Gallifrey, befriending an avian creature, and one of the verses retcons the timeless child in the middle, and it's insane. It's insane, but
I'm sure that'll please a lot of people.
It's a really rude poem, but yeah. So I always find my mind needs an outlet for the gibberish that goes on inside, because if the gibberish doesn't get into the poems, it's going to find its way into the books, and I don't want that. The books are serious, and
Yeah.
of course the poems are serious, but they're like my mind playing with itself. Well, and sometimes the books can get a bit mad. I don't know what happened during the Danger Men, but I went into sort of like hardcore / gore, pornography, Silence of the Lambs on acid with that.
Yeah, I remember.
I do apologise for that, because I should know what the audience is, and there's no way you could have that. It really was.
Yeah, I remember reading it, and I'm thinking, "What are you doing?"
I don't know what happened there, but but to fix it, it didn't take much. The story was there. I just had to tone down the pornography, not pornography. And it's Stella's. I really went with this character of growing up on a pig farm and the horrible things she does, and and I've had that. I've had that character. Yeah.
I think sometimes as authors, when you're writing your first draft, you kind of have to push it a little bit. You have to get everything out, and either you'll trip back before it gets to the editor. If not, then the editor will usually say, "Okay, let's." And you're like, "Yeah, I knew that."
Well,
you just said get it out sometimes.
You said to me that aren't you? You want to do your own original novel, which I've never done. I do have some original novel ideas kicking around, but these books keep coming. I do love doing these unit.
Well, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because I think we all want to do our own stuff, but obviously, if something comes along that
exactly,
do it, and it's going to sell, then obviously you're going to go for it.
And if you've got a good story, like I think Legacy, I think it is the best thing. A friend of mine's read it and said, "This is the best thing you've written. That's fantastic." It is a good story. There are lots and lots of little twists in this that I love putting in that you don't expect happening. Like the first, we all know the Dominator's in it, and there was an original scene that wasn't going to end the way it did, and he's there, and that it moves the story on when you do something like that. And there's a few other things that happen as well that I think are really good twists and character-based twists. Yes, can't really talk about it without spoiling it, and it's got quite an emotional core, and it's all a lot about fatherhood as well. And male relationships. It doesn't pass the Bechdel test. There's only 2 female characters in. One's a WPC, one's a corporal.
Well, it's interesting,
and I did worry about that, because people think, but that's the story is about fathers and sons and relationships, loyalties and things. And I don't think it matters, because that's what the story is about.
Yeah.
And the incidental female characters are in there so that one of the characters can react in the way that he does. It does develop his character.
Yeah.
Well, so I can be accused of being, but the next book I'm working on, I suggested we have female. I can't talk, but they're going to be female leads with more agency in, because the story will allow for it, and what part of the story is about. And I can't really talk about it.
Can you say? Well, you can tell me all this when we.
And Anne Travers in The Man from Yesterday. Anne was a great character to write for. It's such a great performance in the Web of Fear. And she does translate well to the page, especially in relationship with Bill.
Well, she's, like you said, she's so well written, so well performed that pretty much everything you need is there.
She has got that sarcastic edge, and without going into smuggery, which I found Zoe can be quite annoying sometimes. But not Anne. Anne's great.
Anne is great. And on that great note, we're going to have to wrap up this. You and I can continue nattering after for a bit if you've still got a bit of time.
I do.
You do? Okay, excellent. So officially, we're going to wrap this up. And again, thank you to all the viewers, or viewer, who knows, it could be just 4 people, but we'll see, for watching.
Whatever then, as long as they enjoy, that's all that matters.
That's the main thing. So until next time, I've been Andy. Nick has been Nick.
Yeah.
Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.